Okay, we're live. Another weekly wrap up. Andres, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here, Kyle. We didn't have this last week.
No, we missed a week. Thanks to my traveling. Bit under the weather, traveling, still under the weather. I'm traveling. I'm in London now for a few weeks. You can kind of see the lighting is a little bit more gloomy today. They're giving you that London vibe. But yeah, we missed a week. That's my fault. And I think today we're going to try and bring you 2 weeks worth of content in this one episode. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Yep, sure. Um, so 2 weeks worth of content is actually a mix between our last two editions of the DXP Report. So the first sort of stories we'll discuss, those related to the DXP Magic Quadrant from Gartner. So Gartner released their Magic Quadrant, I think, on the 16th or 17th of March. And over the last two editions, we featured two stories as our leading stories. So starting with the most recent one, Kentico. So Kentico, they made the announcement about their involvement in this year's Magic Quadrant. So it's the seventh time they've been recognized by Gartner. They've been positioned as a niche player. And for anyone who doesn't know, Gartner Magic Quadrant highlights the top vendors in the DXP space who Gartner feel meet specific criteria they've outlined. It assesses their strengths and weaknesses and also their completeness of vision and ability to execute. So it kind of gives enterprise leaders some insight into what they should be looking for when choosing their next DXP. Gartner, they named Kentico for their offering of two DXP options to its customers, Kentico Experience 13 and Experience by Kentico. Couple quotes from Dominic Pinter, CEO of Kentico. We believe we've been recognized due to the communication on our direction, especially when it comes to our hybrid headless over pure headless approach. We will continue to communicate where we are going and why we have chosen this path for all our customers and partners. The desire to help our customers grow leads us to deliver easy to use, cohesive products, whether it's Kentico Experience 13 or Experience by Kentico, with an increased emphasis on low code, no code approach, and hybrid headless capabilities. For me, I think that's something that's pretty interesting. Like they're pretty clear that they're gonna be focusing on the hybrid approach, and they're like that's something they really want to hold in on. Yeah. I also think like for something like this, like Gartner specifies this as like completeness of vision. It's something that they talk about. It's also clear for customers. Like customers, I think sometimes this space can not sometimes. A lot of times this space can be kind of confusing if you don't know anything about it. So having that clearness of who you are, what you represent, kind of vibe you bring is going to be pretty crucial for customers as well.
Yeah, I'll get more into like the completeness of vision a bit later because I think we'll talk about Adobe. Um, but yeah, why don't you go ahead and finish your last point here, and
Mhm.
I'll just add something in.
Yeah, just and the last thing I want to mention was the fact that the low code, no code approach, I think, is important for both marketers and developers, and we've been seeing a lot more vendors in the industry kind of doubling down on that approach. They've been adding new features to improve content authoring, make it easier for marketers, but for developers as well, the low code stuff is pretty time saving as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Kentico's doing the right thing here. You mentioned hybrid before. They're very clear about being like a hybrid solution. And I think like hybrid is the word that best describes Kentico. After Content.ai sort of spun off into its own company, that's their pure headless, their Mac, if you will, um, product. That's the product that's also recognized by Mac Alliance, whereas Kentico is not because it's sort of, you know, a hybrid, right? It's sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of that world. And they're doing that purposefully, right? It's not something that's like, Kentico's been again seventh year been recognized as a niche player in the space, and I think they're doing the right thing here. They're doubling down on what they are. They're not trying to change what they are. Content.ai is servicing that market, that group of companies out there who want to be in a headless, composable Mac environment. They're catering to them. Kentico, on the other hand, is focusing on companies who are saying, hey, we still want a bit of that sweet vibe, that monolith vibe, without totally leaving off the benefits of headless, the benefits of being a hybrid CMS, hybrid headless CMS. And again, them focusing on low code, no code. It's exactly the right thing to do for a company in a position in that sort of position in the market. So yeah, no surprise that they've been recognized for sure.
Yeah. So the second story about DXP Minor Quadrant, the first one we featured, was Adobe's and their take on it. So they were named a leader for the sixth consecutive time, and They were positioned highest on the ability to execute access and farthest to the right on the completeness of vision axis. Um, the focus of their take was basically, can I really afford digital transformation? Because that's a question a lot of companies are asking themselves right now, particularly in this like economic climate. And their answer is emphatic: you can't afford not to. Um, they highlight the need for personalized digital experiences. Personalization is something that Adobe's been pushing for like the last couple of years now, I think. And they also had a few stats in there about experience driven businesses perform twice as better across key metrics like awareness and consideration, based on the study that they included in that blog article press release take. Um, they also mentioned Adobe being a CXM leader. So another kind of acronym, another kind of terminology about the industry: customer experience management. They call it a category of categories. So, which makes sense in ways like combining major investments in personalization, customer data management, customer journey management, orchestration, analytics, content management, pretty much the whole shebang, like all those different subcategories that you could imagine would fall under digital experience and combine into one major category. So, like, they see themselves as the leader in that overall
Yeah,
category of
yeah,
categories, which I guess makes sense with like the number of products
yeah,
that
for
they
sure. I mean,
offer.
this is like another good argument against going best of breed, going Mac, going composable. From Adobe's perspective, they're saying, hey, we've got every product you need for that entire customer journey, right? Like with our suite, you can optimize every step of that customer journey, and you don't have to look elsewhere for to fill any gaps type of thing. Which is an argument. I don't think it's a winning argument at the end of the day, but I think it's an argument. But yeah, Adobe is a CXM leader. It does make sense just based on the fact that their product offerings are just so mature now, and they do have everything you need from like step one to step X of your customer journey. It makes sense. I want to mention something on this whole completeness of vision thing. So you mentioned it a couple of times now, Adobe being the furthest to the right of the completeness of vision axis. Again, based on what I just said, it makes sense from that perspective. Their product is arguably the most mature in that sense of sort of catering to every step of the customer journey. It makes sense from that perspective. But what I'm conscious of is that it's very hard to define this completeness of vision, and I think it will change from vendor to vendor, right? I'm not sure how you can argue that Adobe's completeness of vision is more or less mature than Contentful's or Content Stacks, for example, right? I'm not sure what the Gartner, you can you can research what Gartner have said about how they judge that, but again, it's sort of like it's still quite subjective, right? It's not an objective thing. So you know, for me, Adobe have got excellent completeness of vision for their segment of the market, which is companies who have been with legacy vendors or with Adobe previously and are looking to continue down that road, and they're not really looking beyond that. They're looking this whole best of breed, this whole Mac thing. They may be aware of it, but they're not ready to make that jump, or they don't see the ROI in that jump for them just yet. Then yeah, Adobe got a fantastic, completeness of vision for that type of customer, that type of enterprise customer. But it would have been interesting to see Gartner just sort of, if anything, slightly decrease their completeness of vision, because just because of this emerging trend of Mac and composable, which Gartner are well aware of course, that Adobe doesn't have completeness of vision in that particular, to be fair, relatively smaller segment of buyers in the market, right? They don't have messaging for those people. They don't have products for those people necessarily, although there's a little bit of, how to use Adobe as a CMS. It's out there, but it's definitely not, complete in any sense. So it would have been interesting actually for Gartner just to actually say, you know what, Adobe's got excellent completeness of vision for their target market. They're still doing a great job of that, but the market is slowly changing, and Adobe isn't positioned to service this new, smaller but emerging type of buyer that wants Mac, he wants composable, he wants API first, he wants to be able to pick and choose a best of breed system. So yeah, for me, again, I'm not exactly entirely sure what this means. If it means what I think it means, then if anything, Adobe's completeness of vision should actually be slightly, but significantly, shall we say, decreasing, just because they're not in a position to approach this sort of smaller but emerging market. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying, and I find it a little bit interesting. Let me I'll run through some of the quotes from Adobe's take on this first before getting to some interesting another interesting thing I think they said in their take, and also how Gartner kind of positioned them. So this quote comes from Adam Justice, who's Senior Director of Product Marketing at Adobe Experience Cloud. And he said that Experience Cloud and Experience Platform are open, extensible, and accessible to the entire ecosystem, from service and support to loyalty and advocacy. True CXM is vast, and no single vendor will deliver each and every piece of software or functionality required to enable great customer experiences. However, it goes on to say, companies select Adobe as a strategic partner because we have a platform with open APIs that enable ISVs and developers to customize and integrate with Adobe products. This approach assures that companies have access to the latest and greatest tech, with each investment benefiting from the rich data, content, insight, etc., etc. Further down, he also says, unlike other CXM vendors with disjointed products that are focused on narrow aspects of CXM, Adobe combines content and data with intelligent integrated solutions to enable creative agility for content velocity, experience delivery, real-time insights to optimize experiences that drive loyalty and ROI. So throughout that entire quote, when they talk about Adobe being open, accessible, extensible, and accessible, they talk about it from the perspective of it's basically AEM is open and accessible to everything else in Adobe suite of products, making it easier to integrate with Adobe suite of products. They also talk about you can integrate with third parties and stuff like that, but that the entire ethos of what they're saying is our suite approach is better because we give you everything as a package, which for a lot of companies is fair because like some companies just don't want to have to deal with having to source multiple vendors and whatever else. But the other interesting thing about that is, and they said the same. So as we talk about the composability and the other term like DXC, digital experience composition, which obviously linked to composability, that seems to be the main push for a lot of the other vendors and even Gartner themselves. But Adobe, they don't mention composability. They mention it from the perspective of, I think the main kind of thing pushing composability as a whole right now is composable commerce. You see a lot of e-commerce companies and agencies and vendors talking about composable commerce being the main thing. They're talking about, I've seen them mention in a few blog articles and things like that, even a couple of webinars and whatnot. Hey, Adobe can be used for as part of composable commerce. And that's because they see Adobe Commerce. A lot of companies use Adobe Commerce as their commerce thing. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you can integrate with other things if you want to build your composable commerce thing. But they don't push it. And what's also interesting is Gartner, throughout in the Magic Quadrant, they kind of mention. So for each vendor, they have the strengths and the cautions. So basically, the strengths and weaknesses. Like the things, it's like, okay, here's where they're slipping. Other vendors, they mentioned they're not quite there yet with DXC. They're not quite there at composability. Composability wasn't the main theme, but they mentioned it a fair amount throughout. For Adobe, they do not mention that whatsoever as a caution, as a setback, or anything like that. They just say it's premium product, which we know it's expensive and stuff like that. And they mentioned the fact that like Adobe's always innovating. Like they released a lot of new stuff at like the AI and whatnot at Summit, and these are probably they seem to be ahead of the market in certain aspects, but they don't ding them any points for their lack of composability. So and they still position high. So that's pretty interesting. I mean,
Yeah, this is kind of my point. This is kind of my point of the complete vision thing. Like, why, like, Gartner is well aware of like the entire ecosystem, and so that doesn't make sense to me. And as you said, they haven't docked any points for not engaging in that segment of the market. So a Gartner implicitly saying that, hey, you know, we get it, Adobe, you're not in a position to service those guys, and we're just going to keep applauding you for servicing who you can service. It doesn't seem like that's a criteria or an attitude that they extend to everybody, right? Because otherwise, you know, if it was just about, oh, hey, headless CMS X, we see you've got a nice little target market here. We'll give you top points just for servicing those. It's not like that. It's like, you know, the landscape is like this, and we'll grade you on how you respond to that market as a whole. So I'm not sure what's going on there. And I guess this is one of the many reasons why I always sort of I look at the details of these reports with a bit of caution, because I don't think it gives you the full picture, quite frankly. And if you just look at Adobe's positioning and their ranking, if you will, it just doesn't tell you the whole story of what's happening in the landscape, right? So I'm not sure what to make of that. But Adobe, again, as you said, they've sort of your notes here, they've sort of hitched their wagon, right? They've sort of dug their heels in. They're not going for this whole composability or Mac positioning in any sense, which makes sense for them, right? And I think if we as Wordify were consulting Adobe on what to say, like in terms of messaging, like what they said is the best thing they can say, right? Touting the suite and like the package that they have as the strength, right? That's just like that's what they have to do at this point. And I think, like I think I said in the previous episode, they're a big enough company to do that for a while, right? We're talking like they're a big enough company to do that for a year or two before they start really seeing any impact from the Mac and composable world really sort of biting into their slice of the pie, if you will. So it's not surprising. It would have been interesting to see them come with some sort of messaging or some sort of product, like a Sitecore. But I think they're gonna keep their cards close to their chest. I don't think they'll do anything until they're very, very, very ready to do it. They've got like a clear either product or set of products or clear roadmap on how to sort of address this trend. And again, I don't think they're anywhere near it, and I think the messaging reflects that basically. But yeah, interesting. I think this report kind of also shows why Gartner and other analysts that they're useful. I just don't think they give you a total view of what's happening, and I think you have to do a lot of digging around it. But interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so part two. We're on to part two now, and this is where we get into our headless data dive. So, a couple of interesting press releases around reports that featuring the last two additions to the S report. First one we talk about is Storyblock. So Storyblock, they commissioned Forrester Consulting, part of Forrester Research, to do a total economic impact study. And studies based on interviews with foreign organizations using Storyblock, and the characteristics and outcomes from these interviews were combined into a composite organization that is industry agnostic with at least 5,000 employees, including 250 developers, 250 content creators, and an annual revenue of 800 million. And these interviewed organizations, they were using a mix of like traditional CMSs or like custom built monolithic CMSs before they like decided to make the move to Storyblock. And there were some pretty interesting results from this study. So it Storyblock delivered a 582% ROI for customers over 3 years, and with a less than 6 month payback period. They also gained 1.6 million benefit gained due to having a single source for content management, 3x productivity from more efficient deployment setups, and just a better overall customer experience through scalable content operations. So huge.
Yeah, they're big numbers. They're big numbers. They are big numbers. Why don't you go ahead and read out Storyblock's sort of quotes on this, and then I'll give my thoughts.
Yeah. So this one comes from Dominic Angera, co-founder and CEO of Storyblock. The amazing customer ratings and stories we have heard have always been a great indicator that businesses get significant ROI from managing their content with Storyblock. At a time when more businesses are scrutinizing traditional CMS platforms and exploring how a composable headless CMS setup helps them with content operations and creating content at scale, we believe this Forrester study proves that Storyblock is a smart CMS investment. Also, we've got a quote from the head of digitization at a telecommunications company that was interviewed as part of the study. And they say, since we've been using Storyblock, there's been a boost in productivity. It's 3 times faster than the previous system. Even more than that, it's enabled us to tell better stories to our customers in a better way. As a result, several organizations reported customers are spending more time on their websites because they're more engaged due to the regularity in which updates are made. From my perspective, I've seen one of these total economic impact studies before. That one's from Adobe, but it was focused on the component CMSs like AEM guides. So it's pretty interesting to see this from like a headless CMS player, and it just puts hard numbers to.
Yeah, we've praised Storyblock's use of like these sort of first-party data surveys and research that they do. They've done a few of these, and I think they're fantastic. And I think other headless CMSs in the space should mimic it and do more stuff. And I think one sort of pushback that we get as like Wordify helping a lot of these companies create this kind of content is that, hey, we'd love to do like a survey or a study, but there's no way we can get like 10, 20, 30 customers to sort of sit down and talk to us or respond to a survey. But this is a good example of just needing 3 or 4, right? 3 or 4 companies, as long as you're upfront about it. Storyblock haven't said this is across their entire customer ecosystem that everybody's received 582% ROI. They've been clear. They've said it's 4 organizations, one of which is a telecommunications company, and they've just given you the numbers based on that, right? So they're not hiding anything. They're not saying that this is data derived from 100 different Storybook customers. It's all transparent to as far as you can get, and the numbers are there, right? And I think as much as this is a big win for Storyblock in terms of delivering over 500% ROI for any customer, even one customer is fantastic, let alone four. I feel like this is just as big as a win like for the marketing team at Storyblock, right? They jumped on this and they said, okay, we can definitely get 4 customers together to discuss or respond to a survey, and then we can take that and we can show how impactful Storyblock is. And I feel like other head of CMSs just haven't been brave enough to do the same thing. When they've got 3 or 4 customers who are willing to talk to them or respond to a survey, they could probably do something quite similar to this and show the impact of their product. And I think Storyblock's sort of being a pioneer here and saying, you know what, going out to releasing a press release, we've just spoken to 4 customers, it's okay because that's good. In this niche, in this small but growing space, those are interesting numbers, right? We need to see these numbers. We can't wait for a Storyblock to talk to 50 customers to see if the ROI is there or the economic impact is there. We need to start seeing this stuff sooner, right? So I'm super on board with this. Hats off to Storyblock as a company for delivering that. Hats off to the Storyblock marketing team for seeing the opportunity there, and I hope others follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I'd like to mention is like they commissioned Forrester to like gather the data for that study. Maybe Forrester wants to conduct that interview, but yeah, there's also um, other research firms out there. I think when we get to the Mock Alliance one, like they commissioned a research firm to do as well, like that are usually charged with gathering that data, perform those sort of like interviews and things like that. So I think that makes it easier for a lot of vendors maybe working with like smaller teams or whatever, as long as you have a little bit of budget to say, hey, can you source this data for us? Then you've got something you can start working with.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want vendors to see that and think, okay, they were only able to do this because Forrester's involvement. I just don't think it's the case. I think Storyblock themselves, we've worked with them in the past, they're very capable of handling that research themselves and getting it done, or using a smaller company to do that. I feel like we should see a lot more of this sort of zero party or first party, whatever you want to call it, data coming out from companies where it's like, beyond the case study, right? Okay, cool, you've got a case study in the higher education space. It's good to see what you did for that company. But let's start combining your case studies together and start bringing some numbers to the forefront and see, how are these companies actually benefiting in ROI, in terms of hard numbers if possible. I think it can be done. I think it should be done more often.
Okay, so the final story. So the Mock Alliance, they released the 2020 edition of their global research. So it's their annual survey of global IT decision makers, third annual enterprise Mockified research, and it's conducted by the independent research firm Mel Research in December and January. So again, like another independent research firm handling that for them. So they surveyed 500 tech leaders from Australia, France, Germany, UK, and the US to understand how Mac investment has accelerated over the past 12 months and what impact that's having on an organization's ability to thrive in a difficult economy. So just some of the findings from this. 4 and 5 decision makers say that volatility in the economy has impacted their organization's attitude towards Mac, something that's expected. Lexi is still holding companies back, with 1 in 5 companies spending over half their IT budget on upgrades. 87% of those who have increased Mac are more responsive and ahead of the competition. Um, Investment is moving from front end to back end. So 54% prioritized front end investment in the 2022 report, but now it's 39% in the 2023 report. And this was the key one for larger organizations. Organizations with 25,000 or more employees have the lowest level of adoption for Mac in their front end infrastructure and take a more long term view on making Mac investments.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of
Um,
things here.
my
So go
thoughts on
on.
this, yeah, my thoughts on this initially, yeah, I think more than anything, what this data is telling us is that it's hard for
Yeah.
large organizations to make that pivot. So, like, if you have a company with 25,000 employees, the thought process is probably like, okay, you definitely have the money to do this, so just do it. But like, there's so many other different factors coming into play there, and it's something that vendors, agencies, and maybe us included, like pretty much the entire industry, we like there needs to be a way to kind of make that sort of transition easier for these companies, like move from point A to point B? Like I know we can always talk about like the benefits and
Yeah,
like the problems you're having at point A, the benefits you get at point B, but that road getting there seems to be a bit bumpy.
for sure. And I feel like a lot of that lies in the fact that, if we take, let's take Sitecore, because we mentioned Sitecore, so they're pivoting, right? If we take Sitecore as an example, there's a lot of agencies in that space who have only ever dealt with Sitecore, right? And they're just handling Sitecore technology with enterprises who are happy with Sitecore technology, and they have been for 10 plus years. Those agencies, and they're not equipped to say to their customers, hey, we know you're kind of panicking about Sitecore's roadmap. We kind of are too. Um, we've formed a partnership with these two head of CMSs. Let's explore this together and figure out a way where we can start to move into this whole composable Mac thing, and find a way forward, right? That's not really happening because so many agencies in that space who those enterprises have been reliant on only know Sitecore, right? And they're taking their time also to explore the Mac and headless CMS space and figure out who's who, and what it will take to actually start partnering and start migrating people over. It's all uncharted waters for them. So once that happens more, and this is again something we're working to help facilitate, once more legacy agencies, if you will, or agencies who have worked with legacy platforms for a long time, once they begin to explore and form partnerships in the Mac composable best of breed space, whatever you want to call it, I think then that will open the floodgates, if you will, to more enterprises starting to make those transitions and start that migration journey, right? Because it's not, we've mentioned before, it's not an overnight thing. The migration from legacy monolith to composable, even with an agency that's in the know, will take time, right? It's just, as we saw in the data here, organizations with 25,000 or more employees, they've got the lowest level of adoption of Mac, and that's just like makes total sense, right? The bigger the company, the more complex their infrastructure is. They got data in this system, content in that system, multiple legacy systems working together. Migrating that into several different Mac and composable systems, it's a big job. It's a job that'll take time. So yeah, the other thing I was going to mention was the investment going from front end to the back end, with 54% prioritizing front investment in 2022, and now it's only 39% for 2023, prioritizing the front end investment. I had some anecdotal data reach me recently from one agency that focuses on front end only, and he told me because of the economy, they're seeing a lot of companies sort of backing away from headless front ends and saying, okay, we're just gonna go for a Shopify or a BigCommerce, and then focus on other stuff in back end. For the front end, they're not looking for composability right now. So that's interesting. Very anecdotal data for sure, but it seems to sort of match what this data says.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think one of the things we always talk about when we talk about that move to headless is like it's still very developer intensive. And especially if you're a company that's used to working with like legacy type systems, there's a lot more talent available that knows they're in the ins and outs on legacy systems than there is of talent available that knows the ins and outs of these like modern composable systems, if you will. So if you're looking at your existing team, you're looking at everything, you're like, this sounds good, but right now we really can't do it because we just don't have the
Yes,
resources to do it. And it's like it's not only about money; it's like
exactly.
the
And
employees
we
as well.
saw, and I think next week we should talk about this. The whole the Conobos founding member who sort of posted on LinkedIn, posted a blog post about Conobos's journey
Mhm.
with Sitecore up until
Yeah.
now, and then them sort of hitting a brick wall with Sitecore, uncertain about Sitecore's future, um, and they sort of turned to Content.ai, as we spoke about earlier, as their sort of route into the Mac composable space, right? I feel like it's more that
Yeah.
the more that happens, the more these agencies sort of choose that vendor or two or three vendors who they say, okay, this is going to be our sort of avenue in. Um, we'll see more of these migrations start to happen, right? But it will take some time, and there definitely needs to be some
Hmm.
collaboration that has never happened before, right? Agencies who have been
Yeah.
exclusively working with Adobe, exclusively working with Sitecore, exclusively working with Drupal for so many years, are now seeing that,
Hmm.
at the very least, that exclusivity might harm us in the next 2 years, right? We need to be able to play both sides of the fence, if you will. So that was a very real, the Conobos thing, I think we should discuss next time, was a very real
Hmm.
example of what's sort of happening, bubbling under the surface, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, very interesting stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it? I think we're done, right? Part two done.
Hmm.
Okay, excellent. This was literally like double the length of a normal episode, so that works out nicely. Andres, thank you, and we will hopefully discuss the Econo for
Yeah,
next week.
yeah, we're done. Part two.